ॐ दक्षिणास्य समारम्भा शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमा अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ता स्मर्या गुरुपरम्परा श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। परिज्ञानाश्रम श्रीगुरुशङ्कर परिज्ञानाश्रम शङ्कर सद्गुरु केशववामन कृष्णपाण्डुरङ्ग आनन्द परिज्ञान गुरु सद्यो जात शङ्कर सद्गुरुः गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सर्ववेदान्तसिद्धान्त गोचरं तमगोचरं गोविन्दं परमानन्दं सद्गुरुं प्रणतोऽस्म्यहम्. So now we are coming to the actual crux of Mahavakya Vichara. Vivekachudamani is coming to the actual Mahavakya Vichara. And what happened in the last two sessions we saw, the Tvam Padartha was discussed in detail and the Tat Padartha was discussed in detail. So in very simple language, what is Tvam Padartha and what is Tat Padartha? Tvam Padartha means Jiva, you, the Jiva, I, the Jiva. So Tvam Padartha means Jiva. Tat Padartha means that Brahman or Ishvara. Now, Tat Padartha can mean Nirguna Brahman also, which is ultimately the Jagat Karanam for manifesting this entire Jagat. And Bhagwan Shankaracharya takes as Tat Padartha Ishvara also. Saguna Ishvara also is taken. Of course, some scholars do not agree with this, but Bhagwan Shankaracharya does not make any differentiation between Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Ishvara. And according to Bhagwan Shankaracharya, Tat Padartha means Brahman bar Ishvara. That means what? Brahman and Ishvara are both Paryaya Padas. It means one and the same. Ishvara or Brahman is nothing but the Jagat Karanam. The very cause of this entire universe is this Brahman or Ishvara. So Tat Padartha is indicative of that Ishvara or Brahman, and Tvam Padartha is indicative of this Jiva I, which in the Mahavakya is called as Tvam. When the teaching takes place, when the Guru is telling the Shishya, you, the Jiva, are that Brahman or Ishvara. So the sentence goes, Mahavakya goes, Tat Tvam Asi. Tat Brahma Tvam Jivaha Asi. That is actually the meaning of this Mahavakya. Now, Mahavakya, I have to give a little bit of introduction to what this Mahavakya. Mahavakya, as you know, in English, it can be translated as a great sentence, but it has really no meaning when we say that. What we can say is a Mahavakya is the one that has the highest meaning, in the sense the meaning of that Vakya, meaning of this particular sentence is what can really liberate a person and convert a person from a samsari to a jnani and completely remove all the bondage and samsara. That is why it is called as a Mahavakya. Mahavakya because the very Vakya, the very understanding of that Vakya can remove the entire samsara for me. Therefore, it is called Mahavakya. Now, in simple English, we can say a Mahavakya is an equation. When do we require an equation? We require an equation when there are two sides which have to be equated. There are two sides, but we do not know right now that the two sides are equal. Superficially, the two sides look different from each other, but essentially they are the same. To prove that, there is an equation needed. Let us take a simple example. 5 plus 3 equals 9 minus 1. Let us take this example. Now, 5 and 3 on the left hand side are different from 9 and 1 on the right hand side. There is a plus mark on the left side, there is a minus mark on the right side. Now, by any means, can we say that the left side of the equation and right side of the equation are the same? Can we see that they are same? We cannot see. But let us work out the equation. When we work out the equation, what happens? 5 plus 3 is 8, 9 minus 1 is 8. So essentially 5 plus 3 is 8. Essentially 9 minus 1 is 8. Therefore, in an equation, the two sides, the left hand side and the right hand side, look superficially different, but essentially they are the same. This is what an equation is meant to be derived. That is why in mathematics, whether it is calculus or algebra or any branch of mathematics, an equation is meant to prove that the left hand side is equivalent to the right hand side, equal to the right hand side. It is the same as right hand side. Supposing the left hand side is not equal to the right hand side at all by any means, then equation is not possible. It is not possible. Supposing I say 5 plus 3 is 10 minus 1. It is not possible because though the two are different, essentially they are not one and the same because it becomes 8 equals 9. It is not possible. So, when essentially two things are not the same, even though superficially they are different, equation is not possible. Supposing 8 equals 8, equation is not necessary. Equation is not necessary. When is an equation necessary? An equation or to equal or to see two things as the same, what is necessary? The superficially there should be a difference. The left hand side should be superficially different from the right hand side. There is a lot of difference between the left hand side and the right hand side. Superficially, the two sides look very different. But essentially, we know that there is no difference between the left hand side and the right hand side. And to prove that there is no difference to the left hand side and the right hand side, we have to derive the whole equation as we do in mathematics, solving an equation. We have to solve that equation. We have to come to the derivation where the answer is what? Left side is equal to the right side. Therefore, if Jiva and Ishvara, if Jiva and Brahman, if the Tvam Padartha and the Tat Padartha are not essentially the same, there is no need for an equation. Correct? Why do we need an equation? If Jiva and Brahman are totally different, we don't need an equation. The Shruti says that superficially they look very different. Superficially they look different. Ishvara or Brahman is big, the Jiva is small. Ishvara or Brahman is Sarvagnya, all knowing. The Jiva is Alpagnya, very less knowing. Brahman or Ishvara is all pervading, and I, this Jiva, is not even my house pervading. If I'm sitting in this room in front of the laptop, I'm not there in the other rooms. So I'm limited by time. I, the Jiva, is limited by time, space, and another object. Whereas Ishvara or Brahman is unlimited. Jiva is something which is limited by time, whereas Ishvara or Brahman is eternal. Jiva or Tvam Padartha, I, is very, very small, whereas Brahman or Ishvara is something which is infinite. I am very finite. I am limited. The Jiva is limited, Brahman or Ishvara is unlimited. Jiva is finite, Brahman or Ishvara is infinite. Jiva is very small, small knowing, Alpagnya. Ishvara or Brahman is all knowing, Sarvagnya. Jiva is parichinna, limited by time, space, and object, whereas Ishvara or Brahman is not limited by time, space, and object. So many differences are there on both sides. But then, how can the Shruti say that the two are equal? I do not see it. but I have to take the pramana, Shruti as the pramana. I have to take as a valid proof the Upanishads and Shruti. I have to take the valid proof of Bhagwan Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. I have to take the Shruti, Smriti, and Brahma Sutras, the Prasthana Traya I have to take, and then see that all of them are giving me a proof that though superficially the Jiva and Ishvara look very much different superficially, actually speaking, essentially, Jiva is not different from Ishvara. Ishvara is not different from Jiva. How do you prove that? Therefore, we need an equation. If I know very clearly that I am Ishvara, I don't need the equation. A jnani who has already understood that he is inseparable, not different from Ishvara, a jnani who has seen the abheda between himself and Brahman or Ishvara, does not need this equation anymore. Who needs this equation? A mumukshu like me, who has moksha purushartha, but still an ajnani, and I have heard that Jiva and Ishvara are not different from each other. But I don't see the possibility of Jiva Ishvara being the same because I see so much of difference between Jiva and Ishvara. If this is the case, then the Shruti or our Veda, Shruti means Veda, Vedanta, is taken as the Pramana, is taken as a valid proof to tell me that look, superficially you may look very different, but essentially you are the same. Let us take again our favorite two examples. If you take the ocean and the wave, superficially, the ocean and the wave look very different, correct? The ocean is big, the wave is small. The ocean is all the time there, the wave appears, stays for a short time, and disappears. The wave is massive, whereas the ocean is massive, whereas the wave is very small. If you take any of the features, we find that the ocean or samudra and the wave are two different things, but they are superficially different. What is their essence? Essentially, both of them are water. Therefore, samudra is equal to wave. Tat, if you tell a wave, hey wave, don't think that you are different from samudra. Tvam, you wave, are that same ocean. Why? Because superficially you are different. Essentially you are the same. What is the essential sameness between the wave and ocean? It is water. Essentially, water is one, and therefore you are essentially one. Therefore, Tattvamasi holds good for wave and ocean also. Let us take gold and ornaments. Supposing I see a chain and bangle. The chain and bangle look different from each other. A gold biscuit and a bangle look different from each other. The gold biscuit is big, the bangle is small. Gold biscuit has, is, massive. This has particular shape and form. But if you really look at that, essentially, that biscuit, gold biscuit, and this ornament are essentially one and the same. Supposing I say a necklace and a bangle are one and the same, is it possible? Their uses are different, their shapes are different, their sizes are different. One is big, one is small. Their entire, appearance is different. Their usefulness is different. But ultimately, what are they? A bangle is not different from a chain because essentially they are the same. Essentially, they are the gold. Therefore, Mahavakya is very necessary. This is the meaning of Mahavakya. For me, a mumukshu, for all of us who are mumukshus, who want to know the teaching of Vedanta, who want to be free from this bondage, and it was already said that freedom from bondage is that understanding that I am not different from Brahman. Brahma abhinnatvam, we saw in the Tatpadartha, very first verse we saw. Brahma abhinnatvam, knowing myself to be abhinna, not different from Brahman, is the only way to get out of this bondage of samsara. That was what was told in the Tat Padartha Vichara. In the very first verse itself, it was talked about in the, I think in the last session we have dealt with it. Therefore, here now, in the next 7 or 8 verses, Bhagwan talks about what is this equation, what is this Mahavakya, what is this Mahavakya Vichara, and how is it to be understood, how to solve the equation of Tattvamasi. And when the teacher tells me, he says, you are that, Tat Brahma Tvam Jivaha Asi. But then, how do I understand it? I understand it as Aham Brahma Asmi. Aham Jivaha Tat Brahma Asmi. In first person, I understand whatever has been told. Therefore, now here, let us go to the 241st verse, where the Mahavakya Vichara starts in Vivekachudamani, 241st verse. So, तत्त्वं पदाभ्यामभिधीयमानयोः ब्रह्मात्मनो शोधितयोर्यधीतं श्रुत्या तयोस्तत्त्वमसीति सम्यग् एकत्वमेव प्रतिपाद्यते मुहुः. He says here, tat tvam padabhyam abhidhiyamanayoho. Those names that are called as Tat Padartha and Tvam Padartha. Tattvam here means Tat and Tvam Padabhyam. By these two words, by the words Tat and Tvam, which are named in this form, Abhidhiyamanaha means these two words are called Tat and Tvam. What is the meaning of Tat and Tvam? Here he says, in the next line he says, Brahmatmanoho. Tat Padartha is Brahman and Tvam Padartha is Atma. What is Atma here? Jiva Swarupa. What is Tat Padartha here? Brahma Swarupa. Tat Padartha is Brahma Swarupa and Tvam Padartha is Jiva Swarupa Atma. And therefore he says, Brahmatmanoho Shodhitayoho Yadi Itham. Shodhitam. These two words have to be very well shodhitavyam. They have to be inquired into. They have to be deduced. They have to be derived at. They have to be worked out like we work out an equation. There are two words here which we want to know. Am I Atma something different? Is Brahman something different? We already saw that Jagat is not a second entity. Then does Atma become a second entity to Brahman, or does Brahman become a second entity to Atma? No, because there is only one consciousness. There is only one existence. There is only one Atma which is Brahman. There is only one Brahman which is Atma. With reference to this body mind sense complex, with reference to this Jiva, with reference to a jiva, that consciousness is called as Atma. With reference to the entire Jagat, it is called as Ishvara or Brahman. So he says that Brahmatmanoho Shodhitayoho Itham. That means what? Here Shodhitayoho Itham. This means Abhidhiyamanaha Itham Shodhitayoho. Those words which are indicated or called by the name of Tat Padartha and Tvam Padartha have to be worked out or understood from the point of view of Jiva and Brahman, from the point of Brahman and Atma. Atma Brahma Aikyam, it is called, or it can be called Jiva Brahma Aikyam. It can be called Jiva Ishvara Aikyam. All these are one and the same. They are not different things. Jiva is called as, can be, because the Swarupam of Jiva is Atma, it can be called as Jiva or Atma. The Swarupam of this entire Jagat being Brahman or Ishvara, the Tat Padartha can be called as Brahman or Ishvara. So he says, Brahmatmanoho Shodhitayoho Yadi Itham. Shodhitayoho Yadi Itham. Yadi, if, Itham, now or here, we are going to talk about the meaning of the words Atma and Brahman. Then we are going to derive the two words, the equivalence or the the equalness of these two particular words. And he says this particular equation where Brahman and Atma are equated, where the Jiva and Ishvara are equated. This is the ultimate teaching of Shruti. That is the final teaching. Initially, Shruti starts with Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, starts with Tvam Padartha. In Tvam Padartha also it talks about Atma Anatma Viveka. Then it goes to Tat Padartha. It talks about what is Jagat, what is Srishti. Then if there is a Jagat or Srishti, there must be a creator. What is that? Ishvara or Brahman. After all that, the two sides are brought into picture. The Jiva on one side and Ishvara on one side. Jiva, Atma on one side, Ishvara or Brahman on the other side. And he says, third line, Shrutya tayoho tattvamasi iti samyak ekattvameva pratipadyate. Shruti means the Upanishads or Vedanta. What does it do? Tayoho, the two of them are brought together by the Shruti in the form of an equation called Tattvamasi iti samyak pratipadyate. Very clearly it says. And that is the transforming knowledge. What is this Brahma Jnanam? Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi is this Atma Jnanam, which is a liberating knowledge, which is a transforming knowledge. So, what does it say? Shrutya, by the Shruti, Tayoho, between the two words, Tattvamasi iti. The two words are connected together by the Shruti with this particular equation, Tattvamasi. Samyak pratipadyate. Very clearly it is indicated or explained. In what way? Ekatvameva. Tayoho ekatvameva. Tayoho ekatvameva means oneness of the two, non-difference between the two. See, one thing you must understand, Aikyam can mean bringing two things together. But Jiva and Brahman have never been different from each other. So Aikya also may give a mistaken notion that Atma was different from Brahman and now I have brought them together and Mahavakya is Aikya Vakya. No, that is not Mahavakya. Mahavakya is what tells me that there is abheda. They were never two different things. It is not that Atma is here, Brahman is here, I bring the two together with the equation. No, superficially it may look like that. It is not like that. It is inherently, just like in an equation, inherently the right side and the left side are the same, never really different, and the equation proves the abheda between the two sides. Similarly, this Mahavakya equation does not bring the two together but proves that Atma and Brahman were always one, Ekatvameva. They were never separate. I separated them because of my avidya, because of my ignorance, because of my delusion, my confusion. I thought that I was different from Brahman. First of all, I did not even know I am Atma Swarupa. Forget about Atma Brahma Aikya. I thought I was the body mind sense complex. Did not even realize that I am Atma. Even when I realized that, okay, I am not the Anatma, I am Atma. Oh, there is an Ishvara somewhere. I am this Atma and Ishvara is somewhere. So I, the Atma, is an individual and Ishvara is something else, somewhere else. So many philosophies talk like this, but Advaita is not this. There was never any difference, never any bheda between Atma and Brahman. Atma and Brahman were always one, and this Mahavakya proves the abheda, the non separateness, ekatvam, oneness, which has ever been one of these two words. So he says that Shrutya ekatvameva pratipadyate. Shruti gives or explains the oneness of the two words. Tayoho tattvamasi iti vakyena tatyamasi iti mahavakyena samyak pratipadyate. Samyak, very clearly, it explains the Abheda. Rather than saying Aikyam, it would be much more appropriate to say Atma Brahma Abheda. Aikya is also okay, but then it should not give rise to a confusion that we are bringing two things together. There were never two in the first place. Whatever there was only one. Sadeva Saumya Idamagra Asit Ekameva Advitiyam. Ekam Eva Advitiyam. There was one and the only non different consciousness alone. From the point of this Jiva, it is called as Atma. From the point of this whole Jagat Samashti, it is called as Brahman. But there was never any Bheda. It is the same consciousness behind this body mind sense complex. It is the same consciousness existence which is behind the Nama Rupa Prapancha. Therefore, there was never any Bheda in it. So in the next verse, 242nd verse, 242nd verse, it says, ऐक्यं तयोर्लक्षितयोर्नवाच्ययो निगद्यतेऽन्योन्यविरुद्धधर्मिणोः खद्योतभान्वोरिवराजभृत्ययोः कूपाम्बुराश्योपरमाणुमेर्वोः. Now the Shruti says, though the two words are equated by the Shruti, superficially both of them are so different. So here Vivek Chudamani is bringing that into our, that is what we think. That is what we think. How can I be? Everything else I understand. I am not the Anatma body mind sense complex. There is an Adhishtanam called Brahman for this entire universe. All these things I understand. But how can I, this limited puny jiva, who does not have a control over my own body mind sense complex, how can the Shruti say that you are that Ishvara, you are that Jagat Karanam Brahma iti? How can the Shruti talk about it? This doubt will always be there. And what kind of comparisons can I give? What kind of comparisons the Mumukshu gives? That is what is being told here. How superficially they are different. And the difference belongs to what? The difference belongs to the upadhi. That's what is going to be told in the next verse. It is a superficial appearance. It is the vesha. It is the vesha or the upadhi, the appearance which makes the jiva different looking from Brahman or Ishvara. In that case, here he says in the 242nd verse, he says here, Aikyam tayoho lakshitaha yona vachyayoho. When you see this particular equation, don't look at the superficial meaning. The superficial meaning of the two looks entirely different. Superficially, the left hand side and the right hand side of the equation can never be seen as one, because here he says Vachya Yoho. If you take the direct meaning or Vachyartha of the two words, they are very different. Then you have to take the Lakshyartha of the two words. I'll explain this verse, then I'll tell you what is Vachyartha and what is Lakshyartha. So he says, Aikyam tayoho lakshitaryoho lakshitayoho na vachyayoho. Essentially, in an implied meaning, both of them are real, one and the same, really one and the same. But if you look at the superficial meaning of the words, they are not the same at all. Then he says, Nigadyate anyonya viruddha dharmino. Superficially, vachyartathaya, by the word meaning, if you see the two, that is the Jiva and Brahman, that is Atma and Brahman, it looks as though those two are Viparita. Viparita means what? They are absolutely opposite to each other. They can never be one and the same. It looks like that. And examples that are given here, he says, Khadyota Bhanvo river. Can you compare a glowworm with sun? Glowworm also gives light. Sun also gives light. Can the glowworm say it is sun? Though both of them are essentially they are light. But Khadyota, a glowworm, can it be the sun? It cannot be the sun. So I'm the jiva, I feel I'm like a glowworm. Yes, I have got a little bit of consciousness, a little bit of sentience. I'm like a glowworm, a small consciousness. There's nothing called small consciousness, but I feel like that out of my ignorance and avidya. I'm this very big one, that big consciousness, like Khadyota and Bhanu. Bhanu means the sun, Khadyota means a glowworm. Is there any comparison superficially between a glowworm and sun? There is no comparison superficially. Raja Bhritya Yoho, between a king and his servant. Is there no difference? There is a difference. The king is a king and the bhatta is a bhatta. The servant is a bhatta. Raja Bhritya Yoho. Bhritya means the servant or a bhatta. Can you say the king is the same as bhatta? Essentially, yes, all the jivas are the same. But superficially, if you say the king is the same as his servant, will I accept it? No. It is like saying I am like a bhatta and Brahman is like Raja. How can there be any kind of a oneness between the two of us? Kupa Ambu Rashyoho. Can a well be the same as an ocean? Essentially, in the well also there is water, in the ocean also there is water. But the well is small. The well is limited by space and time and other objects. The water in the well may be a sweet water. The water in the ocean may be salty water. The ocean is so big that even I cannot even make out where its particular, boundaries are. I can't make out. So, superficially, can you say that a well is equivalent or equal to a samudra? You can't say. Paramanu mervoho. Can you say an atom is equal to Meru Parvata? Can atom be the same as Meru Parvata? Paramanu means an atom. Can an atom and Meru Parvata be compared and said they are the same? So, what he says here is superficially, if you take the Vachyartha, the superficial meaning or the word meaning for Atma and Brahman, superficially they look absolutely different. As different as the glowworm is from the sun, as different as the Raja is from his servant, as different as a well from an ocean, as different as an atom Paramanu from Meru Parvata, the biggest of the parvatas or mountains, biggest of them. It looks like that. But then the Shruti is not a fool. The Shruti is not trying to fool me. The Shruti is not trying to say something simply like that. But what is it equating? It is equating the Lakshartha. What is the Lakshartha meaning? The meaning of Lakshartha is the implied meaning. What is the underlying meaning of that word is what is called as Lakshartha. Now, let me explain what is the meaning of this Vachartha and Lakshartha. Whenever we take any word, sometimes in language we use, the word has a particular meaning, which is called as the Pada Artha or the Vachya Artha, the meaning exactly as it is, what it says, the word says, the meaning of that word says. But sometimes, when we talk in the usage, a particular word may not be used in the sense of its primary meaning. The primary meaning is called as the superficial meaning or Vachya Artha or Pada Artha. Many times, the primary meaning may not be taken to mean that word. A different underlying meaning may be given to a word. Many times we say double meaning, he talks in double meaning. What is the meaning of that? A person who talks, says something, a word does not mean what he really is talking about. The primary meaning of the word is not there. It means something else. It means its implied meaning. Let us take one or two examples here, to make it very clearly understood. We say that boy is a lion. That boy is a lion. Now, if we use that word, that boy is a lion. Now, lion The superficial meaning or the primary meaning of the word lion is lion, correct? But then, can that boy be lion really? Is it possible? No. How do we understand this sentence that boy is like a lion? That means that boy has the qualities of a lion. He's got the boldness of a lion. So the word, the lion, the superficial meaning of the word is replaced by me by the deeper meaning or the implied meaning. And when somebody tells me that boy is a lion or that boy is a tiger, I clearly understand that the word lion or tiger are implying an implied meaning, not the primary meaning. Sometimes, just to make fun of somebody, a very dull person also, we call that person, oh, I met that Brahaspati. Brahaspati is an intelligent person, but what do we say? I met that Brahaspati. Does it really mean he's a Brahaspati? The person who is using the term Brahaspati also knows that he is not Brahaspati. The person who is listening also knows that that person is not Brahaspati. Both of them are using the implied meaning. The superficial meaning is an intelligent person, Brahaspati. But the implied meaning is, oh, that person is a very dull person. I also understand, that other person also understand. Another example, let us take. He is the pillar of the organization. I say, he's a pillar of organization. Is he really the pillar of the organization? What is the connection between this person? Mr. X is the pillar of the organization. What is the connection between Mr. X and the pillar? Superficially, if you take the Vachyartha, Mr. X is a human being moving around, talking around, and pillar is a pillar which is standing there. He may look like a pillar, that is different. But the thing is, can Mr. X be really pillar? When I say Mr. X is the pillar of organization, implied meaning is he is the strength behind that organization. So, how do I understand Mr. X is the pillar? Temporarily, I forget the primary meaning and take the implied meaning and understand that actually Mr. X is not the pillar, but he has the strength of a pillar, the guna of a pillar. Like the pillar supports a building, this person is supporting the organization. Therefore, Vachyartha means when a word is superficially taken for what it means, the primary meaning. Many times the primary meaning need not be taken. Every word can be used with an implied meaning. The primary meaning goes and an implied meaning comes in certain situations. And here, what Bhagwan Shankaracharya says is when you use the words Atma and Brahman, if you take the primary meaning of Jiva and Ishvara, or Jiva and Brahman, or Atma and Brahman, the primary meaning may not fit in the equation. Because primary meaning, if you take, the Jiva is like a Kanyota, that means what? A glowworm. Brahman is like sun. The Jiva is like a Paramanu atom or atom, and Ishvara is like Meru Parvata. The Jiva is like a Bhatta or a servant, and our Ishvara or Brahman is like Raja. All these things, if you take superficial meaning, primary meaning of the word will not give the correct implication of this equation. So what does Bhagwan Shankaracharya say? Aikyam tayoho lakshitayoho na vachyayoho. This meaning of the equation Aikyam, oneness of the two sides, is from the point of the implied meaning and not the primary meaning. Therefore, we should not take the primary meaning of the words when we see the equation. It is like saying 5 plus 3 equals 9 minus 1. 5 plus 3 is the Vachartha, or it is the primary meaning of the left side. 9 minus 1 is the Vachyartha, or the primary meaning or the word meaning of the right side. But ultimately, 8 equals 8 in the last step of derivation, that is the Lakshartha. So the Vachyartha of both sides is different, but Lakshataya, Lakshartha wise, both are the same. Similarly, Mahavakya, where the Jiva and Brahman are equated, where the Brahman and Jiva are seen not to be separate from each other, here what is seen is the Lakshartha and not the Vachartha. I have repeated it sufficiently because this should be understood very well. Now, what are the various ways in which the lakshartha of a meaning is taken? That is what is going to be talked in the next few verses. But in the next verse, 243rd verse, he says this difference, this superficial difference, is because of the vesha, the dress, the upadhi. Upadhi means what? The characteristics or the attributes of both of them. Jiva's attributes or Vesha. Jiva's Vesha is what? Jiva's Upadhi is what? Panchakosha Sharira. Panchakoshas are the Upadhis of Jiva. What is the Upadhi of Brahman? Maya, Jagat is the Upadhi of Brahman or Ishvara. Therefore, it is the Vesha that is different. The Vesha, Jiva Isha Yoho Bheda Veshaha, Vesha Bhedaha. That's what Bhagwan Raman Maharishi says in his Upadesha Sara, that actually the difference between Ishvara and Jiva is nothing but in their Vesha. They are two different dresses, that's all, nothing else. They are the same, but they are in two different dresses. He says that in the next verse, 243rd verse, he says, in the Bhagavan, he says, Tayor virodhayam upadhikalpitaha navastava kaschid upadhireshah ईशस्य माया महदादिकारणं जीवस्य कार्यं शृणु पञ्चकोशः. So why is this superficial difference between Jiva and Ishvara? What is the reason why there is this superficial difference between Jiva and Ishvara? Tayoho, Jiva Ishvara yoho, okay? Bheda is upadhi kalpitaha, because they are two different veshas. They are two different dresses. That is what is called as the upadhi. This body mind sense complex, which is the dress, which is the vesha of this Atma, is called as the upadhi. This body mind sense complex is the upadhi for Jiva. What is the upadhi or the dress of Brahman? It is Maya, which appears in the form of this entire universe. Potentially, it is Maya, and manifest form, Maya manifesting as the entire universe. So, Maya is the upadhi of Brahman. Maya is the vesha of Brahman. Whereas for the Jiva, Panchakoshas or the Shariratraya is the vesha. Therefore, it looks different. The Vesha being different, the Upadhis being different, the two sides are looking superficially different. But if you remove the Upadhis, can we remove the Upadhis? Can I remove this body mind sense complex from me, the Atma? No. How do you remove it? What we have seen earlier. Munjat ishi kavat. I have to separate intellectually the Atma from Anatma. I have to discard the Anatma as Mithya. I have to negate the Anatma as Mithya. We saw that in Atma Anatma Viveka. What is Atma Anatma Viveka? To carefully release that inner sweet stem of grass from its surface, Munja, to separate the Ishika from the Munja, that Ishika, Munjat Ishika Vat Vivechanam, separating very, very cleverly, very clearly, intellectually, I have to do it. This is the understanding of Atma and Atma Vichara. I cannot separate the body from Atma. I cannot separate the Jagat or Maya from Brahman. They are inseparable. At the same time, by my understanding, intellectually, I can see very clearly that I am not the upadhi. I am not the body mind sense complex. I am that consciousness within this body mind sense complex. I am the consciousness in which this body mind complex exists. Brahman is that same consciousness in which the entire Jagat exists. Brahman is that consciousness in which Maya projects this entire universe. Therefore, the Bheda is merely Upadhi Bheda. So, if you see, the difference between Khadyota and Bhanu is only the difference in the Upadhi. The light is the same. Khadyota may not be seen in the daylight, that's why it is hiding somewhere. In the night, it appears and it is appearing, it is emitting light. What is the difference between light of the Khadyota and sunlight? There is no difference between the light, it is the same light, but the Upadhi is different. Is there any difference between the Raja and the Bhritya? Both are human beings and ultimately both are Atma. But then what is the difference? The Raja Vesha and the Bhatta Vesha. Correct? Supposing the Bhatta is made to put on the Vesha of Raja, he will be called Raja. Therefore, it is the Vesha which differentiate the Raja from the Bhatta. Correct? Similarly, what he says here, Tayoho Virodha Ayam Upadhi Kalpitaha. The Jiva Ishvarayoho Bhedaha Upadhi Kalpitaha. Jiva Upadhi limits the Jiva and Ishvara Upadhi limits Ishvara, and therefore I am not able to see the oneness between Jiva and Ishvara. Na Vastavaha, it is not the reality. Second line, Na Vastavaha Kachid Upadhi Reshaha. This Upadhi is not the reality. न वास्तवः वस्तुतः वास्तवः the upadhi is not the reality. Vastutah, this upadhi is not there either for the jiva or ishvara. What is there is only this atma swarupa. Ishasya maya mahadadi karanam. For ishvara, maya is the upadhi from which the entire universe mahadadi karanam maya. Maya brings out the Karya Prapancha. So for Ishvara, for Brahman, Maya is the Upadhi. Jivasya Karyam Shrunu Panchakoshaha. The Jiva's Upadhi is Panchakosha. Ishvara's Upadhi is Maya. Because Ishvara's Upadhi is Maya, it is a grand and a big projection called as the world. Because my Upadhi is Avidya, my projection is a small physical body mind sense complex. Therefore, the difference that I see superficially between myself, the Jiva, and Ishvara or Brahman is nothing but Upadhi Bheda. Actually speaking, if you take the implied meaning, there is no difference. The meaning, superficial meaning, the primary meaning only shows the difference, and the difference is because of the upadhi. Mine as the jiva is a limited upadhi, whereas Ishvara's or Brahman's upadhi is unlimited maya. I'm saying this, repeating it again and again, and I'm going very slow in this because Mahavakya Vichara is something which has to be understood very well and very clearly. Otherwise, there'll always remain a doubt. That's why I'm repeating it again and again and going very slowly. So he says, because of these two upadhis, there is a Bheda. Then he says here in the next verse, we'll just introduce the next verse, 244th verse. येतावुपाधि परजीवयोस्तयोः सम्यङ् निरासेन परो न जीवः राज्यं नरेन्द्रस्य भटस्य खेटकः तयोरपोहेन भटो न राजा. Same thing which I explained just now. ये तौ उपाधि परजीवयोः तयोः. These two upadhis of Jiva and Ishvara, Samyang Nirase, by understanding clearly by Atma Anatma Viveka, if we negate the upadhis at the level of Jiva also, at the level of Ishvara also. If I negate the Anatma body mind sense complex as Mithya, what remains is this consciousness Atma. Intellectually, when I negate this name and form universe, ultimately I come to the remaining what? Remaining Brahman. So he says, Samyak Nirase. When the upadhi is intellectually by clear understanding negated as mithya. When Ishvara's upadhi, the jagat, is negated as mithya. When the jiva's upadhi, this panchakosha, is negated as mithya, samyak, very clearly, by this knowledge, then happens Rajyam Narendrasya Bhattasya Khetakaha. The Rajyam becomes the upadhi for the Raja, and the shield becomes the upadhi for the Khetaka. Khetaka or the shield becomes the upadhi for the Bhatta. Supposing the Raja is without the Rajyam, the Raja is defeated and he is in the forest. Supposing this Bhatta or this Bhritya also, without his shield which he is holding, he also is roaming around in the forest. What is the difference between Raja and Bhatta? Raja can say, I was your king and you were my servant. And the Bhatta can say, now you are no longer the Raja because your Raja is gone. I am no longer your Bhatta because I am no longer holding the shield and standing, outside your palace. Correct? Therefore, Rajyam Narendrasya Bhattasya Khetakaha. Just like the Rajyam is the Upadhi for Raja, and the Khetaka or the shield and sword which he holds is the Upadhi for this Bhatta or for this Bhritya or this servant. Tayoho apohe na bhato na raja. When the upadhi, the what you call as the shastras and astras are removed from weapons are removed from the bhatta, and when Raja's Raja is removed, who is Raja? Who is Bhatta? The Raja does not have his upadhi, which makes him the Raja. So who is the Raja? Who is the Bhatta? Similarly, if the upadhi panchakosha is removed, how can you remove it? It cannot be removed. If the Panchakosha is understood to be mithya, by knowledge, by understanding, by Atma Anatma Viveka, if I do the Nishedha or the negation of the body mind sense complex as mithya, and by the same Atma Anatma Viveka, I negate the Upadhi of Ishvara, the Jagat, also as mithya. Then where is the Jagat? Where is this Jiva? It is not there. What remains is only this consciousness Brahman. And there is no difference between this consciousness and Tat Padartha, that Brahman. So Tayo Apohe na Bhato na Raja. Therefore, where is the question of the Raja or Bhatta? So here what is being told in Mahavakya Vichara is our confusion regarding Atma and Brahman is because of the Upadhi. Upadhi means the superficial dress or the Vesha. Upadhi means the superficial characteristics. See, today I am wearing this sari. Tomorrow I wear some other sari, but I am the same person. Okay, the Bheda is Upadhi Bheda. It's nothing else. When I am at home, I may be, a mother or whatever it may be. When I am in my workplace, I am something else. That is my Upadhi. I may be a manager. At home, I am a householder. I am a mother at home. I am a manager in my office. But that managership is my upadhi. This at home, this mother is my upadhi. I am the same. I am not two different people. Similarly, Atma and Brahman are not two different things. From the point of upadhi, it looks as if they are two different things. And because the upadhi of the jiva is very, very limited, and the upadhi of Ishvara is very, very massive, I feel that I cannot be Ishvara. How can I be Brahman? How can Brahman be limited like me? It is only because of the Bheda in the dress or the Upadhi. Once I understand that Upadhi here also is Mithya, Upadhi there also is Mithya, then I see the Vastu. Vastavam, what do I see? That which is behind this Upadhi, the Tvam Padartha, and that which is behind that Upadhi, the Tat Padartha, are not different from each other. Primary meaning wise, Vachyarthataya, they are different. Implied meaning wise, Laksharthataya, Jiva and Brahma are not different from each other. This is what is being told so far in the, Atma, Brahma, Aikya Vichara called as Mahavakya Vichara. Some more are there. There are some more verses which are going to describe how this implied meaning is derived. Just like we derive an equation in certain steps, how the implied meaning is derived from the superficial meaning. How we can get rid of the superficial meaning and come to the implied meaning. How Vachartha can be converted into Lakshartha. How Vachartha can be negated and Lakshartha can be brought into picture. That is what is going to be talked about in the further verses. So we'll stop here today in this session. We'll take up that in the next session. ॐ नन्दन्तु साधका सर्वे विनश्यन्तु विदूषकाः अवस्थाशाम्भवी मेस्तु प्रसन्नोऽस्तु गुरुः सदा सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ तत्सत्